And we're back in the studio like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your hopefully happy hump day here with me on another frigid, windy day here in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. We start with an anniversary and then a season in my life since I've opened up a little bit more and I'm very much appreciative of so many new members and new subscribers to the YouTube channel. Give a little window into the thinking, where perhaps I've been, where I am now, and components of life which seem massively important or are massively important at a certain time that you think are always going to be really important and end up simply being distant, hopefully golden-hued memories. Well, 13 years ago today, I was in Las Vegas at the Monte Carlo, and I had not seriously played blackjack in 15 years. So, brief recap. Some of you know this. I play poker recreationally. I'm okay. I'm nothing special. I'm a solid poker player, but I don't have any particular poker playing ability. Yeah, I have a mathematically inclined brain. My dad was a CPA, the C in SCF and Co. But I was not always a poker player. When I was in my early 20s, I was briefly one of the most feared blackjack players in Atlantic City. And that's the story that I want to talk about today. The fact that 13 years ago, on February 19th, 2012, I played blackjack from the perspective of being a card counter for the final time. So, my dad being a CPA, and my mom's mom was a lounge singer who, this is a cliche, and Frank Sinatra told these kinds of stories numerous times, Dean Martin, lounge singers of a certain era were almost always really good card players. Whether it was poker, whether it was blackjack, whether it was any number of card games. My grandmother, successful singer, she taught me how to play cards. She was the first person to teach me how to play poker, how to play blackjack. And even in her later years, she would take trips to, whether when she lived in St. Croix, there really weren't much in the way of casinos, but she moved to Florida and she would check out the local casinos. And then when she came to live with my mother about 30 years ago, my mom was still in Massapequa. She was not even as old at that time as I am now. That is a very, really incredible thought. I barely get the words out because to me, my mom was already really old in the mid-1990s, and I guess I am too in the mid-2020s. But Grandma used to take the occasional day trips to Atlantic City. Usually took the bus, didn't want to hassle with the driving, and her eyes had started to go, whatever. And I had not played any card games with any real seriousness up to that point in my life. I had an idea of blackjack. I knew how to play poker. We used to just play various poker games, usually 5-card draw, 7-card stud. But I wasn't any kind of a serious card player. Despite having the mathematical inclination, it wasn't in any way part of my life, and I never imagined that cards were going to become important. Well, as luck would have it, summer of 1996, I accompanied my grandmother and my mom on a day trip to Atlantic City. And we went to the Sands, a casino palace that has long since gone the way of the dodo. The Sands, I think, was raised in about 1998, maybe even earlier. Didn't have much time left. But we went to the Sands, and I was working for my father. I had a couple of $100, and I played some video poker, and I hit a jackpot of $500, but I almost immediately put it back in, and then went over to check out blackjack because I didn't know anything about playing craps. Roulette, to me, you might as well just hand your money over ahead of time. But I said, yeah, let's give blackjack a try. And what's the goal of blackjack? I naively thought, well, you got to get as close to 21 without going over as possible. Now, there's a percentage of hands where that's the goal. But if you go into a session of blackjack where you intend to play for a while, if you have enough money, if that's all you know, you are going to get fucking stacked. It's almost impossible to win for more than a couple of minutes if all you know is what I just said, because that's part of the game, but that's not really it. There's a lot more than just that if you want to have any chance. Because you play for a couple of minutes, there's no rule that says I can't drop a $10,000 bet and hit back-to-back blackjacks and walk away. But in general, the longer you sit, the stupider you play, the more money you're going to lose. It's just anything else. It's simple, cold, hard math. In the immortal words of Angelina Jolie and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's cold, hard math. So I sat down, 22-year-old me, very analytical mind, bad attitude, but really knew nothing about this game. And I may as well have just handed $100 to the pit boss and just gone and done something else with my time. But I sat down at a $5 minimum table, bought in for $100. I had 20 red chips. And about 5 minutes later, all 20 of those red chips were safely nestled in the dealer's till. And I was frustrated that I had lost $100 so quickly. And I got up. And under normal circumstances, that would be the end of this particular story. But there was something about the game that was intriguing. And I started thinking about the movie Rain Man and the sequence where Dustin Hoffman as Raymond Babbitt, with his mathematically inclined brain, was counting cards and beating the shit out of, I think it's supposed to be the MGM Grand. Oh, I'm sorry, I think it was Caesars. Just smashes them. So I said, you know what? Let me learn a little bit more about this game, see what we come up with. I had a lot of free time. The mostly still pre-internet era. I had access to the internet in theory at New York University, but I didn't have it at home. The phones were still, I didn't have a cell phone for another 6 years after this. I had a lot of idle time to read books. Unbelievable concept, right? The next day, I went to the local bookstore and I picked up a couple of books on blackjack and how to count cards. But it isn't just a question of counting cards. There is a lot more to becoming a winning blackjack player. Infinitely more. And the truth is, if I knew how difficult it was actually going to be, no thank you, I'm all set here. But either fortunately or unfortunately, I have the kind of personality and I have the kind of wiring where if I become interested in something, I'm going to inhale it. I'm going to consume it. And that's exactly what I did. In a matter of a couple of weeks, I was able to count down a deck of 52 cards in under 15 seconds and tell you, when I say tell you, I was able to guess what the last card is. Now, when I say that, I don't literally mean in the form of a magic trick. If you use a count system, a certain kind of count system, there are times where you will be able to guess the last card with accuracy. The more complicated the count system, the easier, quote unquote, it is to actually guess the last card. Because normally you don't know what's what. Every count system for blackjack grades 10 value cards the same. Because in the world of blackjack, unlike poker, whether you get a 10, a jack, a queen, or king, it's the same value. It's always a 10 value. Whereas, as we know, poker is entirely different. This is why I remember somebody that was a poker player sitting next to me playing blackjack, and he gets dealt a pair of aces, and he goes, wow, I just got pocket aces. I'm like, bro, that's not pocket aces. That's really not that great of a starting hand. In blackjack, it's okay. You have a 2 or a 12. Are you allowed to split the aces? Just hope you don't keep drawing threes, because that's something that would always seem to happen. You start splitting aces, and then when it's time to take it, you get a 3, a 2, a 3. But that's the game. I was very, very quick, and I studied how do you play, what's the actual basic strategy, when do you adjust the basic strategy. How high does the count have to get? How low? When do you start making seemingly idiotic plays because the count is telling you to? And this is all, it's all analog. This is basic stuff. But to actually do it in a casino is not as easy as it seems. Or maybe you would assume it's impossible in a casino. But after a couple of weeks, I felt comfortable. I was playing a very simple level 1 plus minus kind of account. And when I say level 1, it's not any more complicated than no card is assigned a value that does not have a 1 attached to it. It's either a +1 or -1. Some cards have a value of 0. And the idea behind card counting is that the dealer has to draw until reaching 17. They don't have a choice. The dealer is a robot in casino blackjack. They literally could replace the dealer with the iRobot from the Will Smith film. It would not make a difference unless he tried to kill somebody. But it wouldn't make a difference. They have no say in the play of the hands. You could have a table where all of the players, you got 9 players, and everybody has a 12, 13, 14, 15, 12, 13, 14, 15. And the dealer has got a 10 and a 6. The dealer cannot simply call a halt to the hand, I win, fuck all y'all. No. Even if every player is at that moment beaten, the dealer cannot simply stand on 16. Got to take another card. So the more high cards that are still in the pack, let's say 6 decks, the better it is for the player. Why? Because when the dealer has to draw to a potentially breaking hand, like even a 12, where if a 10 comes out, the dealer breaks because you can't go over 21. The more 10s and 9s that are in the pack, the better for the player. Now, you're going to have shoes, that thing they deal from, where a lot of high-value cards come out early. Well, that's when you got to throw your minimum bet out there. Now, all of this might sound convoluted. It's really not. Once you start to play and you get into the rhythm, it's very, well, for me, it was easy. Card counting is a young person's endeavor. It is not something that I would ever attempt again, even if I enjoyed playing blackjack, which I don't. It's incredibly dull, if we're being honest. Poker is endlessly fascinating to me, but that's beside the point. I did a test run at home. I bought a dealing shoe, and I had chips, like $10,000 worth of chips it was supposed to be, and I would deal 3 hands to myself, and I was counting, and I was stopping the shoe after about 4.5 decks and shuffling, because nobody ever deals to the last pack, or rarely. Every once in a while, at Resorts AC, the old Merv Griffin Hotel, which is still there, they would go to the last deck, but that's very rare, because the casinos know the further in we go, if there's a skilled counter, it increases his potential advantage. Doesn't mean you're going to win, but it means you might have an advantage. You could have a 10% advantage and still get the shit kicked out of you, though, because it's random chance, even within the context of, well, you have a 10% edge. Hey, there are certain prop bets on craps where the house has about an 18% edge, but if it comes in 3 or 4 times in a row, Joe could have won $100,000. So that's why you can't get hung up on having the advantage. You can still get fucking killed. So I went to Atlantic City. I went to the Tropicana, playing this kind of wimpy, weak, but still better than nothing, level 1 count. And I sat at a table for about 8 hours, accepting personal needs breaks. And after 8 hours, I was playing at a $10 minimum table. I came out, I think I was behind $5. But my perception was the skill of the play kept me from losing more. I did everything right, and I'm pretty sure in all that time, I did not make a single mistake. The idea is you increase your base bet, the greater your theoretical advantage based on the so-called count. And that's that. You increase your base bet, and as the count maybe normalizes, as a lot of 10 values come out, you might go back to a minimum bet. But the general concept is when the house has the advantage, you bet the minimum. When you have the advantage, you bet more. And that is how card counting works from a broad sense, and why it's possible for somebody who knows what they're doing and has endless amounts of money to risk can't lose. Because if you're consistently getting, let's say, $1,000 onto the table when you have a 3% advantage, and you're betting $5 or $10 or even $25 when the house has the advantage. Again, do the math. It's 1 + 1 = 2. The consistent advantage yields consistent victories. But on a given day, you can get the shit kicked out of you, as I can attest to, and that's one of the things the movie Rain Man doesn't get into. The truth is, just because Raymond Babbitt can count literally like he's a computer, what if the dealer draws all those blackjacks? Because in the world of the film, Raymond and Charlie seem to be just hitting one blackjack after another, and they make huge amounts of money in one trip. The dealer could draw all those blackjacks, and they could go home busted. That's the nature of the game. That's why you don't want to, just like with anything else, you don't want to have too high a percentage of your total stake on the table at any one time. Because blackjack can be pretty fucking brutal. It's not an easy game. Yeah, it's easy to play, but it's difficult to keep your cool. Unlike poker, where I might go in there and throw a $200 buy-in for a tournament and crash out, I still only lost $200. I'm capped. You sit down with $5,000 at a blackjack table and you play the way that I'm talking about, let's say at a $50 minimum table, you could lose your $5,000 in one freaking shoe. One shoe. Caution is always recommended. So I started playing using this low count system, and I didn't really do poorly, but I felt that I was quick enough and I was mathematically inclined enough that I could go to a more difficult count. So I memorized a different count, which had different methodologies and different things to do based on the count. And when I went to the more difficult level 2 count, which was called the Advanced Omega 2, and I got it out of a book called Blackjack for Blood. What a great title for a book. There was a Jack of Spades on the cover of this book, Blackjack for Blood. You can Google this. The author's name was Bryce Carlson. He's holding a dagger covered in blood. What a fucking great visual that was. Blackjack for Blood. So I mastered this level 2 count system. And when you get into a level 2 or higher, that's when you can pretty much take guesses, and you may end up with something where the last card, in that one, there's only one card in the deck that has a -1, a 9. So if I am counting and I get 51 cards out, and in my head I have a count of +1, obviously it has to be 0 at the end of the pack, I know the last card's a 9. Anyway, using this level 2 count, I started fucking raking. My normal day was, because I had free rooms at the Tropicana. The Trop was incredibly generous with free rooms back then. If they sensed that somebody was betting a decent amount of money, as I was, again, within normal parameters, I wasn't throwing down $1,000 bets. But they were more likely, they just wanted to get you in the casino and take their chances that they're going to get your money. I used to start my day, I would drive from Huntington at the time to the Tropicana, sometimes on Saturday morning, sometimes on Sunday. I was still attending classes at New York University as the summer ended. So I would be driving from Atlantic City to New York City. It's not that bad of a drive. As Matt Damon in the movie Rounders talks about, from Lower Manhattan, be at the Taj, at the time the Taj, you could have been at the Taj in an hour and a half from there. The easiest drive, a lot of miles, but with no traffic from the city, piece of cake. You don't even need to take the Garden State Park. We just take the turnpike and just rip down there because everyone's doing 80. You're doing 70, you're still going to make it pretty quickly. But I was playing this count system, and I would start my day at Resorts. Resorts was very, very laid back. There were very few pit bosses, and they didn't seem to give a shit that I was doing things you're not supposed to do. You are not supposed to play a 20 or 40 to 1 bet spread. If you come in sitting down and you're playing 2 hands of $5, now it would be, if you're lucky, 2 hands of 10 or 2 hands of 15. You are not supposed to go from there and then suddenly you're betting 2 hands of 100. You may as well stand up and scream, "I'm counting cards," or wear a shirt that says "Card counters do it by the numbers." You're literally exposing yourself, no pun intended. That's what she said. But I did that, and I just began fucking crushing it. So my day would start at Resorts. Sometimes I would stop at the Claridge, which is still there, but the Claridge is, there's no casino in the Claridge anymore. But I would go to Tropicana, and I didn't really play much regular blackjack at the Trop. The rules were okay, they had a really stupid rule called surrender. No, it was a great rule for the casino because nobody knew how to use it except me. People would just be randomly surrendering. You have a 14 against the dealer's 6, not 6, a 14 against a 7. You surrender. It's like, bro, you're just basically giving them an additional 12%. Don't do that. Yeah, but I'm going to lose. I know you're going to lose. It doesn't matter. You're giving them too much. You're giving them too much by surrendering. The whole thing with blackjack, in a nutshell, is that it is a game of defense. It is a game of making the best possible move when it looks like you're going to lose. So this doesn't seem like this is why this game isn't fun, because you're mostly under assault by the dealer. You're under attack. You have a 13, the dealer has a 7. What are you supposed to do? You're screwed no matter what. You take a card, you're less likely to lose. Occasionally in blackjack, you get to go on offense. You seem to have the hammer, and you try to maximize your profits when that happens. But it is a game of defense. I didn't like playing at the Tropicana because they only had 8 deck shoes, and they shuffled before you even got 6 decks in. There wasn't any point. So at the Trop, I took it easy. I played mini craps and didn't really do anything heavy. But the Claridge and Resorts, they consistently dealt deeper. So I had a couple-week streak and one incredible day where I went to Atlantic City with, I think I went with 1,000, and then I had an account at Resorts, and I took out a marker for another 1,000. So I actually had 2,000, but I never actually sat with 2,000. I may have had money in my pocket, but I would start with 500. And I had this unbelievable day where I ended up making like $5,200 or $5,300, which is completely insane given that my betting was within normal parameters. But I just happened to have there were a series of shoes over a number of hours where whenever the count went super positive, the dealer just was breaking one hand after another. And even in spots where you didn't expect it, where the dealer would have a 10 up, turn over a 6, and pull a 7 to break. It just kept going on and on and on. That was my biggest ever take in Atlantic City. And I didn't reach those heights again in AC and, in that era because they figured out what I was doing. And it's not a question of whether you win or lose. It's a matter of, do they perceive you to be a card counter or not? And I was very sloppy at Resorts with the way I was betting and not even attempting to camouflage what I was doing. I was just throwing everything at them because I figured I had a short shelf life. But I hastened the process by not even attempting to camouflage, because one thing that all of the card counting books say, you must camouflage, you must protect yourself, and don't make it blatantly obvious. Unfortunately, I fit the profile of a card counter, a young guy who looks like he has a bad attitude wearing glasses. I mean, you can't even write the script any better or worse, depending on how you look at it, than what I just said. So I went to Resorts on another week or weekend, and as soon as I raised my bet from $5, I only went up to 25. The pit boss gave me a look and a little smile. He turned to the dealer and he said, "Shuffle." And the dealer did one of those. And the pit boss put his hand on the dealer and said, "Shuffle." And then the pit boss stared at me. And I got the message. Every time you raise your bet in this casino, we're just going to shuffle the cards. Play something else. Like what? The accordion? That's something I actually said. One of the pit bosses, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Just because I won? He said, no, not just because you won. Don't talk to us like we're stupid. Well, you're talking to me like I'm stupid. Just play something else, Mr. Cohen. Like what? The accordion? Yeah, play something else. That's what they told me. So Resorts was now out. I went over to the Claridge, which is very close to Resorts geographically on the boardwalk as it existed back then. I sat down to play at the Claridge, and the first time I raised my bet, shuffle. Now, what the hell's going on here? Mr. Cohen, play something else. the casinos are not really working together. But once someone, circa 1996, was labeled a card counter, certain sister hotels would share information. I had never been pulled up on at the Claridge. I had barely played at the Claridge, and here I was raising my bet to $25. Shuffle. They can't throw you out. But if they don't let you play blackjack, objective achieved. So that was pretty much the end of my blackjack career. All the way back then, my effective range, I played for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, seriously, and I was already out of business. 13 years ago today in Las Vegas, because I figured, well, they're not going to, all these years later, 16 years later from 1996, and now I'm in Vegas, I've never been here, are they really going to know who I am? It's not like I made that much money when I sat. I had one big day. Went to Vegas. I prepared. I got myself ready. Went through the same training program. Figure out how I'm going to play, how I'm going to bet. I am definitely going to camouflage, look for a $10 minimum table, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't range your bet like a lunatic. All that. But I now was in my mid to late 30s. And the truth is, I was nowhere near as sharp as I had been in my early 20s. Like I said, this is a young man's endeavor. And in this case, young man, I mean like early to mid 20s max. This is not John Malkovich, just like a young man coming in for the quickie. I was still good enough where I felt that I would have an advantage under the right circumstances. Because there are times at a full table when nobody is betting a lot, the bosses aren't paying any attention. The problem is, there were just too many floor bosses in Atlantic City during that era. Maybe it's different now. I have no idea because I haven't played blackjack in AC since this. So I'm at the Monte Carlo, got a decent steak, and I'm ready to go. And I sit down, buy in for $500. And when I tell you for the next 4 hours, I played brilliantly, and I got fucking destroyed. I got beat so bad, it was an accumulation of some of the luck that I had back in 96 coming home to roost all those years later. Now, I was not playing as well, but I was doing everything according to what my brain had calculated. I have a count of -3. I'm going to hit a 13 against a 2. Hit, break. All right, I'm supposed to stay now because the count's +6. Break. The dealer seemed to go shoe after shoe, drawing to 21, 7-card 20s. If I had been betting more than $10, well, I would have run out of money, quote unquote, on the first day. I just got smashed. I don't remember having anything like that, even when I used to practice for hours a day. It felt like for 4 hours, I lost 90% of the hands. And I had a stretch of close to an hour where it was either a loss or at best a push. And then there were, this is so stupid, there were a couple of times the count was sky high and I won bets because I gambled that, so to speak, that the dealer had blackjack. I took insurance. I was doing everything right and just getting beaten over the head. So finally, I'm down about $2,000 and I'm not made of money. I'm just a regular guy. It's different when you're a college kid and somebody's paying for your entire existence. Now money is real. This is, this no tournament. This for real. Down about 2,000. First day, I'm like halfway through my theoretical Vegas playing stake. I hadn't started playing poker yet. Seriously, I should point that out. This is a blackjack story. So I do something they tell you in the blackjack books, don't ever do this. But we didn't used to say tilted, we would say steaming. I was steaming, I was pissed off. So I said, you know what? Fuck this card counting. Maybe I'm not playing right. I was. I tried to convince myself I was making mistakes. I wasn't. I was on the button. I was just a little bit slower. I'm not counting anymore. I'm going to go to a table with an automatic shuffler. And I'm going to play a progression system. See, it's good that I had all of these different modalities memorized. Again, the good memory. The son of an accountant who was clearly neurodivergent and on the autism spectrum in the 40s. 1940s, that is. and me, who was not diagnosed, but very clearly also neurodivergent on the spectrum, I had memorized a blackjack progression betting system. And lo and behold, I started to win. An automatic shuffler. And in a matter of about 25 minutes, I had turned around that battering that I took. And I look up, I'm up $500. I stood up from the table, flipped a $25 chip at the dealer, and I knew in that moment on February 19th, 2012, at the Vegas Monte Carlo, I was never, ever going to play this idiotic game we call blackjack again. And I have not been dealt a hand of blackjack since. Nor I will. Well, I've played blackjack at home games for fun, not for actual money. But I will never, ever, ever play casino blackjack again. The game is boring and it is brutal. I had quite enough in my younger days. And I had quite enough in those 4 torturous hours of getting torched. No more blackjack for me. But I hope you have been entertained by this kind of crazy story of how I ended up playing high-level casino blackjack, how I was a professional level blackjack player all the way back in 1996 as I prepared to go into my final year as an undergrad at New York University. This has been episode 448 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your, hopefully, frigid happy hump day here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.